also cannot. Suffocate, right? You'll suffocate and die. So either way, right? To its peril, right? And sometimes it's the same, even in relationships, right? When we hold too tight, when we open too wide, right? It's difficult, right? So he's saying that an intimate space is a space where growth can take place, where it's nurturing, but yet it's not suffocating. Mm. But the interesting thing is with Jesus, right? We have found an intimacy, right, that is even beyond fear. That you don't even have to begin to worry, right, with Jesus, right, whether you're too close or too far. Right? Because Jesus says, do not be afraid. Come to me. And it's a new space, right, where you can move freely without fear. Because what Jesus does is by making his home in us, he allows us to make our home in him. And by entering into the intimacy of our innermost self, meaning that Jesus enters us, our lives, our spirit, our hearts, he's basically offering us an opportunity to enter in this same intimacy with God. Mm. And so when it comes to God, right, there's no distinction even between distant or close. We are actually at home with God because Jesus has made his home in us and we make our home in him. And that in itself, to me, it's a very special gift. I know it's something that we kind of have to sit and think about a little bit, even in our lives. But we have been given a very special gift. Right, beyond all the great literature on worthiness, on love and belonging, right, we have been offered, that Jesus has offered himself and says, let me make my home in you, and you will find your home in me. And I think that's just something mind-boggling for me. So I just want to throw a few questions to you right now, and this is for your own personal reflection, okay? Firstly, what are you often anxious about? What are the what-if questions or how questions or could I, should I, would I questions that revolve in your mind from day to day? Okay. The second question is, what does Jesus' vulnerability mean to me? If Jesus took on a vulnerable form in every way, in order to show us what love truly means, what does that mean to you? What does that mean not just theoretically to you, what does that mean to your life? What does it mean to you when you think about vulnerability in and of itself, in your own life? Okay. And the third question is, are you home? Can you hear the inner voice of love as Jesus calls you? You see, the voice of our first love, and we find this in 1 John, right? Basically what that verse, whole entire passage is talking about is, you are loved long before other people can love you or you can love others. You are accepted long before you can accept others or receive their acceptance. And you are safe long before you can offer or receive safety. That you are loved, you are accepted, you are safe. Whether you feel it or not right now, is a separate matter, because sometimes we get a lot of things all messed up within us, right? And we don't really feel loved, we don't really feel accepted, we don't really feel safe either, right? But the reality is that God is saying that to us, because I first love you, so you can go and love. So you are loved, you are accepted, you are safe. But can you hear the inner voice of love in your heart? Okay? So those questions are for your reflection. Now, some questions for discussion. And tonight we're going to have a couple of different times when we're going to do discussion. I know some of you are new, you may not know anyone here, but please feel free. We're going to break up into maybe groups of about 3 or 4. And if there are any new people, please, go up to them and, get to know them. And then we're going to share some of these questions and some of the answers because you're the experts, okay? I'm here more to facilitate the process, to share some insights that I have personally benefited from, but you are going to contribute to the discussion today, all right? I'm sure you have lots to say. So if you can just kind of find maybe 3 or 4 of you can come together and then can discuss these 2 questions. How do you nurture a relationship with God? 1. And then how do you want to nurture intimacy with God in your daily life? Okay. If these are not comfortable questions for you to answer, because for you personally it's not, maybe you're not a Christian, maybe, it's okay. All right, just say pass. Okay, and get other people to share, okay? Yep. Okay, Ken? So please kind of get into your little groups and you can start a discussion. I'll give you about maybe 5 minutes, okay? Don't be shy, Yes, Calvin? Huh? Right, okay. Yeah, that's the thing that I'm hearing, right, from different people, for some of you, right? It's a bit hard, right, when you talk about relating to God as if you're relating to a human being, right? And we often in Christian terms, we like to talk about relationship with God, right? Oh, how's your relationship with God? And then in this case, I give you such a difficult question. How are you going to develop and nurture your intimacy with God? Wow. It's like, then some of them are like, but I can't even see God, and I can't WhatsApp God, cannot call God. How to nurture into very very chim, yeah. And I think the other thing that makes it chim sometimes is also that there are, and like what Karen brought up just now, right? That there are actually a lot of obstacles sometimes in our relationship with God. Things happen in our lives, right? Like in her case, her dad passed away a while ago. And that really made it very hard for her, right, to see God in that circumstance. And to wonder if God's still there, and if God still cares. And I think that happens to a lot of us, right? Maybe a relationship breaks down, maybe something happens and hurts you deeply. And you go like, God, if you're still around, why is all these things happen to me, right? How many of you? Yes, right? And that all lies in, those are all different obstacles along the way, in the way that our relationship with God takes its form, right? Sometimes it goes up and down. Sometimes it's in the darkest times that we might find God, but sometimes for other people it's not the case, right? So, in your discussions, right, were there any interesting or good ideas about how you nurture your relationship with God? Some of you. It doesn't have to be very complex. Yes. Come, let me give you the mic.
So we were just talking about how every moment of the day, just being present about, people say, well, where is this Holy Spirit? He hasn't visited my door today. So it's kind of just being present around how we're feeling, connected to the world, to, things that are happening around us. And so maybe it is that connection to gratitude for where we are right now. And right now there is no problem, and it's just, and that's where it is.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And that's something that Karen brought up also, right? So I asked her, so how did you get back to, God and, realizing that God is still there? And she said, and what y'all was saying about being present, right? Seeing how God was working in different other parts of her life and realizing that God was still there, that God still cares, and so in different ways, I think being aware, being able to observe what's going on in your life. And I think you brought up a very good word, right? Gratitude. That I was learning to be grateful for what we do have and what we do experience. And sometimes we see God in it. Later on, we'll be talking a little bit about gratitude. So, we'll keep that for that time. But any other ideas, any other thoughts in your discussions with your groups? Yes, Sean.
I think, as what Polly mentioned, it's pretty tough. But to me, I think nourish the relationship with God is really to see God in every one of us. I think, to me, I always remind myself that when I talk to someone, it's something that God wants me to do. And sometimes I see God in everybody, even though I may hate the person. In a way, hate is quite tough. But then it's the experience that God wants us to go through. Whether is it bad or whether is it good. He wants us to learn something. Because a lot of time, as a Christian, when we pray very hard, say, God, give me a sign. What is it going on? What we want this. Why is it not happening? Everything. And he just remains silent. But actually, he actually prepared someone beside you and just telling you, just dropping hint, just whether we listen. And then to me, that's why I kept telling myself, at work, in church, everywhere, see God in every single person, whether it's good or bad.
Thank you for that, Sean. And that's a really good point, right? Because we talked about how Jesus makes his home in each one of us. And what that tangibly means, right, is that God lives in us. And although we may be quite flawed, each one of us, but there are glimpses of God in each one of us as God works in and through us. And that's why when we talk about growing together, we talk about doing it in a community, right? Because we agree, God is very hard to see. God has no skin. God does not have WhatsApp, as far as I know. If you know the number, you tell me, yeah? But we do see God in each one of us. We do experience God in each one of us as we learn to love, as we learn to serve together, as we learn to do life together. Right? And so that's a huge and very important part of our lives, right? So thank you for that. Any other responses from your groups? Any other ideas? No? I'm going to leave these questions with you. I know that they are not easy questions, not questions that you can just kind of answer off the top of your head, but think about them. How do you nurture intimacy with God? I mean, if God wants us to be close to God, if God wants to make his home in us, how do we nurture that? Okay? And every one of us is different. Like some of us do it in different ways. I do it in a different way. I do a lot of journaling because in my time of talking to God, it helps me to be able to see my process and my journey from many years up to now. I do it through nature. I go into nature and it blows my mind, right? When I see how God's creation, it reminds me of who God is. A lot of times through music. Music kind of really cuts through a lot of the thing, the craps, cuts through all the kind of stuff in my head or mind. It goes right to the heart. And often I experience God there. So maybe in different ways, you would nurture intimacy. Now, let's talk about love. Right? And some of you are talking about, it's very hard to talk about love and intimacy, right, with God, right? So let's now talk about people, okay? And all of you are experts here, huh? Okay? And if I ask you, right, if I ask everyone here, what is love? I think I'll get a lot of different answers, huh? So I want you to kind of discuss in your group, right? Come up with a definition for love. And the reason why I want you to do that is that because we actually all know what love is, and yet we don't. If you had to come up with a definition for it, it can actually be quite hard, right? It's one of those things, right? So just spend a couple of minutes, just talk about it, all right? Don't worry, I have a definition for you. It's not necessarily the best and the most correct definition. It's one definition, okay? But I want you to just spend some time to engage your minds and your expertise on this area, okay? So what is love? Maybe we can do this discussion together, since I'm going to ask you anyway, right? So any of you, the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about love, it can be just one word. No need to have a full definition. Yes? Yes? God. Whoa. Whoa. Actually, that's not my answer. Very good. So spiritual. Okay. Yes, God is love. Love is God. Excellent. Yes. Any other definitions? Care and concern, absolutely, right? Love, is care and concern embodied. Yep. Sorry? Endless? Is that the name of a song? Yes. Well, we would hope that love is endless, right? Okay, absolutely, yep. There's a concept of time. Yes. Commitment. Yeah. So absolutely, love is not just about like, hey, let's go out and have fun. But it does have an element of commitment to it, right? Yes, Sean. Feel. Well, tell us about the feel. The feeling, is it? Oh, something you cannot control. And? Oh. Wow. Okay, so it's the intimacy of What do you say just now? Intimacy of? There's the intimacy you feel for a person, right? Whether a person is physically there or even not there, right? Even the person is dead, there's a feeling that continues endlessly. Huh? They continue to have that feeling for a person. That's, wow, fantastic. Yes. Faithfulness. Oh, absolutely, right? So what comes to your mind when you think about faithfulness? Commitment, right? Okay, so absolutely, commitment, right? Basically, love is a kind of a promise, a kind of a loyalty, faithfulness, commitment to that, right? Another person, yes. Decision. What kind of decision? Come, tell us. Okay. Very good. So together with Sean's answer of feelings, right? Yeah, you can have a lot of feelings for a person. You can even have them for a person endlessly, even after they die. But sometimes feelings come and go. The person haven't died, the feelings die already. So there is a commitment, there's a faithfulness, there's a loyalty, there's a decision. And sometimes it's a choice and a decision you make every single day, right? When you are with someone. Absolutely. Wow, you're really expert, Anyone else? Yes, Yeshen. Sorry? Motivation. Okay, motivation in what way? Motivation for what?
It encourages one to, you know, do something like do something for the person, or say,
So it encourages one to do something for that person, right?
work on the relationship.
Okay. So it motivates you to work for the relationship, right? So it gives you motivation, right? Love. Good. Anyone else? Yes. Sacrifice. Okay, come tell us about sacrifice. Married couples, got a lot of stories. Come.
Giving up your right, and then accepting the other person as who they are. Yeah, sacrifice in terms of time and personal preference sometimes.
So there's actually a lot of sacrifice in it, right? Sacrificing your own preferences, sometimes your own rights, and just accepting the person for who they are. Completely, right? Absolutely. Thank you. Who else? Yes, so many. Okay, yes.
Trust and respect.
Excellent. Very good, right? Trust and respect. Very important in love, right? We often don't talk about respect in love, but respect is such an important part, right? And absolutely, trust. Yes, Jeffrey.
Covenant.
Covenant. Wow, can you explain covenant? How is covenant different from commitment, faithfulness?
More teamwork only.
Just want to be chim, is it? Okay. Actually, covenant is also something that we take before God, right? A little bit different. Well, maybe a deeper sense of commitment. Yes.
Unity.
So unity between two people, finding that bond between two people. Patient and kind. 1 Corinthians 13, is it? Yeah. Patient and kind. Yes, Irene, you say something, is it? Connection, absolutely. Love is connection, the bond, the unity. Anything else? Respect, trust, covenant. Sorry? Power. Yes, explain power, please.
What's probably a bit related to that motivation, and it kind of has an energy and I don't know, it just kind of, there's a power to it, and that even in the face of adversity, nothing can break it down.
Yeah, so the power is not just a motivation for each person, but there's some kind of energy or power within the relationship itself, right? Sorry, yes.
Similar life-giving and healing, rejuvenating.
Absolutely right. Is that something you've experienced in your life? Don't worry, I won't tell Angela. Yes. Yeah, but definitely, right? Life-giving, healing, rejuvenating, right? It does something within us from inside out, right? I mean, ideally, it could, that it would be life-giving and healing. Absolutely. Thank you very much. I mean, I think all of you encapsulated a lot in the definition. This definition is not from me. Okay, I'm not the expert. This definition is actually from Brene Brown after she's done all her research, right, when she was interviewing different people. I was trying to put into words, because it's so hard to actually define what love is, because there's so many elements to it, right? And for different of us, different things are important. So this is the definition she came up with. We cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known. And when we honor the spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. And that's very important, because we often think of love as a gift, where we actually give or get from someone. But it's not. It's something that we nurture and grow. A connection that can only be cultivated between two people when it exists within each one of them. So it starts where two people actually love themselves, there's love within themselves, and they can give and cultivate that love with someone else. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay? Shame, blame, disrespect, betrayal, the withholding of affection damage the roots from which love grows, because it's a cultivation, right? Love can only survive these injuries if they are acknowledged, healed, and rare. Okay? And so that's her definition of love. There are different thoughts about love, right? I want to just share with you, and and we can think about those things together. But I always like this quote a lot, and it was about being, just now what Brene Brown said about being deeply seen and known, right? And I think that's one element of love we hardly really think about. It's about knowing and being known in a very deep way. So to be loved, what Tim Keller says, but not known, is comforting, but superficial. To be known, but not loved, is our greatest fear. Imagine if you were known, and the person says, I don't like what I see or know, right? That's our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God, is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. A lot of the elements that y'all talked about just now, right? How the energy that we have, the power that we have, for it to be able to withstand difficulty, how it can be healing, how it can be life transforming. I just want to talk a little bit about Viktor Frankl. I don't know how many of you have actually read this book. A couple of weeks, Reverend Yap was actually preaching a little bit from here. But I read this book a couple of years ago, and it was actually a very life-transforming book for me. For those of you who may know, Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, and he was living during the Nazi era. He's Jew, right? And during that time, just before the Holocaust, he was a young man. He had just got married. His wife was actually pregnant when they were all herded into the camps. Of course, the men and women were separated, so he had no idea what happened to his wife. And so during his years being shuttled from camp to camp, of course, there was a lot of suffering, and he was trying to understand, in the midst of suffering, in the midst of having everything taken away from you, even your hair, because, it's not just everything taken away, like your wife, your life, your house. It's like they are stripped, right, naked, right, and they are shaved completely, right, so they have no hair at all, right. And he said, in the element, right, where you actually stripped of everything, right, what meaning is there to life? And I think that's a very important question we need to ask, right? Because some of us ask that, right? If everything was taken away from us, is there any meaning to all of this? Is God still there? Right? And so I thought it was very moving when I was reading his account. And he was talking about how there was one day when he was very, very tired. They were actually out laboring along the fields, carrying a lot of very heavy things, and they haven't had much to eat. But he realized in the midst of actually doing all that physical labor, right, he actually remembered his wife, remembered something that she said to him, and it brought him great joy as he remembered her, the words that it was almost like he could hear her voice in his ears. And he said, for the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is true love, man and woman, human beings, is true love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. And he actually put the words love, the capital L, there. I mean, I didn't put that, because I believe when he said the salvation of man, human beings, is true love and in love, he wasn't just talking about romantic love. I mean, I'm sure that was the manifestation for him, the bliss that it brought to him. But he was going back to the source of what love is, capital L, that God is love. And that we are made in love, we were created in love, and we were created to love. And that was what we talked about in the first session, right? And so the salvation of human beings is true love and in love, even when everything is stripped away. That's that one thing that we can actually go back to. He made another observation. He said, love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality. Remember what we're talking about? Deeply known and seen. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves him. By his love, he's enabled to see the essential traits and features in the beloved person. And even more, not only does he see the traits, he sees that which is potential in him. And that's something we didn't say anything about, right? That love is sometimes seeing the potential in a person that they don't even see in themselves. And not only seeing that potential, but by loving that person, the loving person enables the beloved to actualize these potentialities. By making him aware of what he can be and what he should become, he makes these potentialities come true. And I think a lot of you have seen that in relationships as well, and even in your friendships, right? That when you see potential in another person, you're there to encourage them. You're there to tell them, you know what, I think you could be really great at this. And the person said, no lah, I cannot lah, please lah, right? And then you go like, no, but I can see that in you. And you encourage them and you walk with them. And then one day it becomes true. They're actually doing what you always saw in them. Right? And that's what love can do. So, now that we've talked about love, so many definitions, what is intimacy? Difficult to define intimacy with God, right? Okay, now tell me intimacy with human beings. Okay. What is intimacy? When you think about intimacy, what comes to mind? Yes. Sorry? Where the heart meets. Oh, what do you mean by where the heart meets? Where two hearts meet. Is it? That kind of thing? Where more hearts meet. Is it? Yeah, so what do you mean when you say where hearts meet? Yes.
Where the distance between
Where they come closer. Oh, so chim, huh? When the distance between two souls come closer, right? Wow, very good, huh? Intimacy, nearness, right? Yes. A shared space, absolutely, right? And it could be between two people, it could be between all of us, that in this shared space, we're sharing something, right? There's something going on, right? And I hope our souls are moving closer. Huh? Maybe lah. Anyone else? Intimacy. What is intimacy? What comes to your mind? Touch. Absolutely, right? Yeah, and when you say touch, what do you mean? Physical touch, body contact, absolutely. Right? That's a very important part of intimacy, right? Sometimes we are very scared to say it, but sexual intimacy, physical intimacy, those are all very important parts of intimacy, right? The coming close. Yep.
Yeah, so just talking about the intimacy, the physical thing, but it's just even a hug or, just some sort of connection. So that physical, but just a hug, it kind of, and I believe it actually does something to our to our new brains here.
No, absolutely, right? I mean, a hug, right? It does something to our brains. It draws people together in a very short time, right? What else? Anything else? No? Two souls coming closely together, shared space, right? Let me share with you a more official definition, but not that your definition is not correct. Your definition is very good. And this comes from the dance of intimacy. It says intimacy means we can be who we are in a relationship, not just a romantic relationship, but even here with one another. And we allow the other person to do the same. Being who we are, what does that mean? It requires that we can talk openly about things that are important to us, that we can take a clear position on where we stand on important emotional issues. We can clarify the limits of what is acceptable and tolerable to us in a relationship. And allowing the other person to do the same means that we can stay emotionally connected, right? The soul to soul thing, right? The connection, right? We can stay emotionally connected to the other party who thinks, feels, and believes differently without needing to change, convince, or fix the other. Right? So this intimacy has to do with the dynamics within a relationship. An intimate relationship is one in which neither party silences, sacrifices, or betrays itself, and each party expresses strength and vulnerability, weakness and competence in a balanced way. Right? So both parties get to do, and nobody betrays themselves. They don't have to silence themselves. And while love is sacrificed in some ways, but you sacrifice in a way that works for the relationship as balanced. You don't feel like you're like, okay, always not being able to say what you actually really think or feel. Now, so now that we talked a little bit about love and intimacy, right? Just wanted to leave these two questions with you. What's something interesting you realize about love and or intimacy today? Maybe some of these things are not absolutely new to you, but maybe something sparked, something reminded you of some of love and intimacy, and that was something that you wanted to kind of remember and bring home with you today. And then, what is one thing you'd like to do as a result of this realization or reminder? Okay. If you can, would you get into your groups and just discuss a little bit? And then I'll come back to you in a while. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited and thrilled to see all of you. Have you all had your dinner? Still need to have, okay? I mean, those of you who still need to have your dinner, please, go ahead and sit down there. I'm going to start, but, go ahead and have your dinner. Join us as you go along. Grab a drink if you need that. And for those of you who feel comfortable enough, would you maybe just kind of scoot over a little bit closer to the front so I don't feel so lonely up here all by myself? Thank you very much. Please. Cool. How many of you were here for the first session? Oh, cool. Wow, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for coming back. As you notice, we actually have slightly less people today. Quite a lot of people are away. Some people are sick also after the Chinese New Year feasting, including Miak. He just messaged me just a while ago and said, I can't make it, I'm sick. I think he ate something not right that he said he cooked himself. But he asked me to let you guys know and convey his apologies. But thank you and welcome. For those of you who are here for the first time today, you're very welcome as well. It's okay. I mean, what we'll do is it's a continuation of the session 1, but I'll be focusing on different topics today. So for those of you who want to catch up on session 1, it's online on our FCC website, on our guides, on our study guides. So please go there and look for our resources, and you can find it there. Okay? Will you join me in a word of prayer, even as we start? For those of you who are not comfortable praying, please feel free to not participate. Just give us a moment as we pray. Okay? God, our heavenly and loving parent, we come to you with great joy because we are so full of gratitude for all that you have done in our lives. We pray that tonight, as we look at love, fear, intimacy, compassion, gratitude, that God, will you open up our hearts, our minds, our ears, that we may hear from you and that we may hear from one another as we share, as we discuss. The Lord, will you move in our hearts? That all this will not just be knowledge or things that we interact with and think is perhaps good, but things that sink into the depths of our hearts. That your Holy Spirit will be here to nudge us, to challenge us, so that we'll be greater lovers of you and greater lovers of people. So God, will you allow your presence to rest in this place? Allow your presence to be with each one of us as we share in this time together. And we commit it to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, for those of you who were here the last time, and as we get the slides up and going, there you go. Okay. So, what we did the last time, right? A couple of things. It's all up there: connection, belonging and worthiness, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. Okay. And we talked about what does it mean to be wholehearted. Anyone? What does it mean to be wholehearted? Yes? Focus? Focus, yeah. Focus in what way? Putting other things aside, being able to put your whole heart into something, right? Focusing, right? Anyone else? What does it mean to be wholehearted? And even if you weren't here last time, it's okay. Just jump in with your answer also can. You can add on to our list. Yes? Open to giving and receiving. Is that what you said, Lauren? Yeah? Open to giving and receiving. Having a big open heart, right? Approaching things with that, right? Absolutely, yeah. Okay. It means basically I'm all in. It means being all in all aspects of our lives, right? It means engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness, right? And having the courage to show up fully. And I think that's very important. I mean, having the courage to show up fully means that we come into life in every aspect of our life, whether it's in church, at work, where we show up as ourselves. Okay, and that's what it means by being wholehearted. We talked a little bit about what that means because it means exercising courage, compassion, and connection every single day. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, okay? I also shared with you the 10 guideposts by Brene Brown. We didn't cover everything in detail because it's actually going to be very hard within the sessions that we have and the time that we have to cover everything in detail. But we'll be covering a couple of different things today. So I'm just flashing this up there so that just to kind of refresh your memory, okay? Right? Okay, today, what are we going to be doing? Sorry, I'm looking back up because our screen is not working. It's not on. Today, we're going to look at a couple of different topics. Of course, Valentine's is coming. But that's not the reason why I chose to focus on love. It just happened to be, okay, coincidental. But I think it's also a good time to think about it because whether you celebrate Valentine's or not, I think it's always a good time for us to just to spend some time reflecting together and discussing about what love truly is, what it means to be loved by God, what it means to love God intimately, and what it means to love ourselves as well as others, right? And so we're going to cover a couple of different things about that today. Okay? First, right, before I actually talk about love proper, right, I want to talk a little bit about fear. What a thing to start with, right? And the reason why, right, is because we actually live in a world filled with anxiety. You agree? No? If you ask yourself, right, the type of questions that fill your mind from morning to evening, what kind of questions usually go through your mind? Okay. And if you are like most people, okay, what kind of questions? Any questions that come to your mind right now? Things that kind of bother you, things that would you, should you, could you, all kinds of questions about that, right? And usually they are kind of like tough questions, right? Because you're kind of worried. It comes from a place of worry and anxiety, right? Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Oops, thank you. Any other questions that come to your mind on a day-to-day basis? If you actually examine some of the questions, oh, thank you so much. If you think about the kind of questions, right, that comes to our mind, right, often a lot of questions circle around. Of course, would I, should I, could I? What if? Right? What if? What if I don't find a partner and die alone? My worry, yeah. My anxiety. What if I don't have a house, a job, a friend, a benefactor, someone to help me? What if they fire me? If I get sick, if an accident happens? What if I lose my friends, if my relationship doesn't work out? Lots of what if questions, right, in our lives. And how? Right, you are saying, how? How can I survive in this rat race, in this life? How can I raise children in a world threatened by war, terrorists, global warming, and the whole list of other things that threaten us? How can we be safe in an increasingly volatile world? How can I be liked and accepted by my community, by my neighbors, by my friends? How can I make it to heaven? Is a question that some people ask. How? What if? And we're always surrounded by questions like this. But you know the problem, right, is that fear never gives birth to love. And that's the reason why I want to start talking about fear first, because I just wanted you this evening to think, what questions guide your lives? What questions revolve around your mind from day to day? Because those are the questions that either generate lots of fear or they allow love to birth within you. Okay? So that's just a question for you. Which questions deserve our undivided attention? Talk about focus, right? Our wholehearted attention. Is it the questions that come from fear and anxiety? Or are there more important questions that we should be committing our attention to? Okay, and today we'll be looking at some of those questions, right? I think the important question right now, even at this moment, is, are there ways we can gradually overcome our fears and let love be our guide? Right? We're surrounded in a society that's consumed by anxiety and fears. Even if you are not, overwhelmed by fears, people around you, your family, your friends are constantly saying, yeah, but what if, like that, and then the terrorists, they come to Singapore, how? And we all constantly have all this, right, surrounding us. So how do we gradually overcome that? How do we let love be our guide instead? Oops. Okay. I'm just going to let you watch a video by Henry Nouwen. The last session, we actually watched the part 1 of the video. This is the second part. It's about 15 minutes, but he talks a little bit about the way of Jesus. And I want to link this up later to answer the questions about how we let love guide us, okay?
Not just me, but because he needed so many people, hundreds of people over the last 34 years of his life had cared for him. And all these people who had cared for Adam had become a community of love. And when Adam died, there was a whole community that said, thank God.
I'm very thankful for the AV team, right? Because they've been trying to embed the video since just now. So thank you so much for trying to do that.
What more of a teacher do you want? We're going to talk now about God's vulnerability in Jesus. I suddenly realized that Adam was Jesus coming to me again. We're going to talk now about what are we going to do in that short little life we have? How are we going to live it? That's the question. How are you going to live when God sends you to the world for a little bit? How are you going to live it? What way are you going to live it? And the answer is, and you know, that is the way of Jesus. And the way of Jesus is the way of vulnerability. The word vulnerability, you know where it comes from? It comes from a Latin word that means wound, vulnus. Jesus' way is the way of woundedness. Anybody wants to come up and help me with this? Anybody wants to come up? You want to come up again? You're welcome. But, that's good. Why don't we talk together? That's nice. Thank you for coming. Now, I want to talk first a little bit about the way of Jesus, okay? And I want you to listen very carefully, because Jesus was born like a little baby. He totally dependent on other people. And when Jesus died, he died on the cross, and he was totally dependent on other people. You need help. Sometimes you walk, or sometimes you do things. I need help. We all need help. But we don't always like it. We like to do it on our own, you know. We like to say, I don't need your help, I can do it myself. And that's okay. But it's important to know that God, who is the powerful God, says, I want to let you come to know me by becoming a baby, by becoming a dependent teenager, by becoming a young man who works in the carpenter shop of Joseph, and as the person who finally is laughed at by everybody and says, you're worthless, you're no good. And it's very important for you and for me and for us to realize that God showed us the love of God through vulnerability. Through somebody who said, I need you. I need your help to walk. I need your help to talk. I need your help to go to school. I need your help. And then only for a few years, just a few years, Jesus could walk on his own feet and speak. And then again, they said, oh, you're no good. Get out and you will let. And it's so important for you and for me and for all of us to know that God showed his love in vulnerability, in being dependent. And you know how they call Jesus? They call him a marginal Jew. It's a big book written about Jesus called The Marginal Jew. Somebody who is not in the center. Or they called him the peasant of Nazareth. Who pays attention to peasants? Or the man from this little town that nobody had respect for, called Nazareth. Or they called him this crazy prophet. And we believe that in this very weak, vulnerable, broken man, God came to show us his love. So, and that's what, and what I want to say is that if that's true for Jesus, it's true for us too. Okay? So why don't you sit down and we'll talk about it. Think about that just for a moment. Think about that great mystery that God reveals his love in vulnerability, in brokenness, in weakness. And not only long ago when Jesus lived, but right now, right here. The great mystery of our faith is that we get closest to God when we are willing to be vulnerable, when we are willing to say, I need somebody else, when we are willing to show that we don't have it all together. And this is so important. Because whether our disabilities are visible or not, we all have them. And whether we might not be able to walk or to talk or to eat by ourselves or to feel good about ourselves or it's exactly there that Jesus comes, and it's exactly there that God's love becomes visible. Not where we are powerful, not where we are strong. It's interesting. I was at the university, and you heard that for 20 years. And it was always studying about God and teaching about God to all these bright students. And I give talks and lectures, and somewhere it was a very, very much of a competitive world. I want to be smarter than others. I want to show them that I could be with it and all that. And I suddenly realized that it was not in strength and power that God was coming to me, but in weakness. That's why I went to Lash. That's why I went to a community where people with disabilities are in the center, are the core, so that they could become my teachers. All these professors of Harvard and Yale and Notre Dame weren't able to say to me what people could say to me who were weak and were not afraid to hide it, were afraid to show it. And my own whole personal journey has not just been, oh, I want to help people with disabilities. No, my question was, I have to have better teachers. I have to have people who might not be able to walk or talk or eat by themselves or think logically or give lectures or all of that, but they can show us who God is. They are the place where God comes to me. And they help me to discover that I might be quite handicapped too, after all. And I want you to hear this very well, because the question finally is not how can we help people with disabilities, which is a good question, but a much more important question is how can we allow people with disabilities to give their spiritual gifts to us and call us to conversion, call us to wholeness, call us to love? That's the question. You believe? You see what I'm saying? That's the real question. And so I want to talk a little bit about one man called Adam. When about 10 years ago, I joined a community for people with disabilities. They said to me, Henry, why don't you help Adam? Now, Adam was a man who could not speak. Adam was a man who had constantly epileptic seizures. Adam had a curved back and he could not straighten out. Adam was always in a wheelchair. Adam could hardly eat without a lot of help. And they said, Henry, you take care of Adam. I said, oh, no, not me, I tell you, I'm not scared. But no, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Early in the morning at 6 o'clock, you go, you take off his pajamas and give him a nice bathrobe and walk him to the bathtub and give him a bath. You shave him, clean his teeth, comb his hair, look out of the window what kind of weather it is and decide what he's going to wear. And bring him to the breakfast table and help him to eat. And by 9 o'clock you can go to your work. What you think is your work. I was really afraid. Very afraid. But Adam and I really fell in love with one another. And as I helped him day after day after day, I suddenly realized that Adam was leading me to a place that I'd never been. Place of prayer, place of intimacy, place of community, place of God. And this very, very disabled young man became truly my theology teacher. And he taught me that being is more important than doing. I wanted to do many things. And Adam says, be with me. Just be with me. Adam told me that the heart is much more important than the mind. And that the human person is not a person who is bright and can think, but somebody who can love, give love and receive love. But what makes us human is our heart. Whether we can speak or not, that's all not the first important thing. And Adam told me that doing things together was more important than doing things alone. Because Adam needed so much help that about 10 or 20 people sometimes needed to be around him to make it through a day. But these people started loving each other in order to let Adam live. And just by who he was saying, love one another, because if you love one another, and I can live. And that was true. Because if we wouldn't love each other, we couldn't hold. And just a few weeks ago, Adam died. He was 34 years old when he died. And I was right there with him. And I preached at his funeral, and I brought him to the grave. And people came from Seattle, and from Chicago, and from Nova Scotia to be at his funeral. Because not just me, but because he needed so many people, hundreds of people over the last 34 years of his life had cared for him. And all these people who had cared for Adam had become a community of love. And when Adam died, there was a whole community that said, thank God for Adam, who never spoke a word, who never walked, who never could recognize persons or even say thank you. How much more of a teacher do you want? And if we speak about God's vulnerability in Jesus, I suddenly realized that Adam was Jesus coming to me again. Adam, who has been loved by God from all eternity, who was sent to us just for 34 years, and who died to go home and praise God and leave behind him a community of love.
So, Jesus led the way to vulnerability, right? When God came in the form of Jesus into the world, it was to come in vulnerability. Okay. So how can we overcome our fears and let love be our guide? I think one is recognizing the type of love that we actually go back to. You know, in our modern world, we talk a lot about self-worth. We talk about, how we are inherently worthy, right, of belonging, and that's all wonderful. But I think one thing that we have as Christians that is extra special, that's even more amazing, even more powerful, is that we have a basis to go back to. That we know we are loved irretrievably and irrevocably. We know that is what God has done for us through Christ. And so this pastor, Tim Keller, he said, we are more wicked than we ever dared to believe, but more loved and accepted in Christ than we ever dared to hope at the very same time. And that's our human condition, right? We are, the part of us is more wicked than we ever even imagined, but at the very same time, we are so much more loved than we can ever imagine, right? And we find that full and complete acceptance through Christ. So let me ask you, right? And I just want you to think about this question even as we go through this section, right? How do we grow intimacy with God? If we truly are so loved by God, if we truly are so accepted by God, and that's the basis for who we are, for our sense of worth, for our worthiness to belong, And how do we grow this intimacy with a God who is so great and big and, I don't know, no skin, a bit hard, right, sometimes, right, to imagine, right? How? I want to take a couple of thoughts and just share these things with you, and later we'll go into a time of discussion. This comes from a book by Norman called Life Science, and he talks about a couple of these things. Let me just run through it with you. You know, Jesus, in a couple of parts in the Gospel of John, he said, "Make your home in me as I make mine in you." And this is Jesus' invitation to us for intimacy, right? Then he adds, "Those who remain in me and I in them will bear much fruit." And this is a call for what we call fruitfulness. Okay? And then finally he says in John 15:11, "I have told you this so that my own joy may be in you and your joy may be complete." Joy. In this, he promises ecstasy. So these three themes are the threads that go through the whole of John's gospel. But today we just want to look at intimacy, right? When Jesus says, "Make your home in me as I make mine in you," he's actually offering us an intimate space, a place where we can truly call home. You know, a lot of us Singaporeans, right? I don't know which is your favorite national song. I don't know lah. Mine is Home lah. I think for a lot of people it's Home, right? Then like, oh, quite touching, huh? And I think there's something that reverberates within us, resonates within us, right? When you think about home. Because home is a place where you find belonging, acceptance, a place where you can truly just be yourself. You can totally relax. Like he says, let go of our defenses, be free. Free from worries and tensions, pressures, where we can laugh and cry, dance, embrace, be quiet, dream, be with a friend, be with your loved ones. Home is where we rest and we are healed. And that's what Jesus is actually offering us, right? Now, firstly, before we go into this part, is it a bit dark out there for you? Do you want a bit more light so that you won't be so sleepy? Just wondering, like, I can't see you also. Okay, thank you for switching on the lights. Fear is a great enemy of intimacy. And remember earlier on we talked about fear, right? You know, how our lives, the questions that revolve around us in our lives often comes from a place of fear, all right? And with fear, it's very hard for us to experience intimacy, whether it's intimacy with God or with other people, because fear makes us run away from each other or cling to each other, but that does not create true intimacy. Have you experienced that before? In your relationships with people, at least, right? Either you are so afraid, you run away, or you're so afraid to lose them, you latch onto them, right? Cling onto them because of our insecurities, right? So afraid that they'll abandon us, right? But that, both of that, right? That safe distance, that safe closeness, right? It actually does not create true intimacy, right? And so, you know, Noah himself says, whenever I create too much distance, too much closeness, I actually sense a lack of inner freedom, a resentment toward the power that they have over me. So what do you do with that? Cannot too close, cannot too far, then what? Right? If you have seen the book before, in front of the book they have this image, right? And this image is actually because Noah had a very good friend when he was serving in and living with the disabled community. And this friend, Jean Vanier, was trying to explain what that intimate space is actually really like. So I said, you know, imagine if you had a wounded bird in your hand, all right, like that, right? And the wounded bird is resting in your hand. What happens when you open up your hand? To open, what happens? Yes, Sean. Drop, right? It will drop, right? Why will it drop? Because it's wounded, right? So it tries to fly because it's trying to escape or fly away, but it can't. So it's, you know, so it might fall and die, right? And get even more injured. What happens if you close it too tight? Kind of like nice and fluffy and, you know, great, right? But very often, right, just like we talked about when it comes to obstacles in our relationship with God, right? Love is often experienced with a lot of hurt, right? A lot of pain in our lives. And so sometimes we find that, oh yeah, all this talk about intimacy and vulnerability, oh yeah, they're great in theory, but there's a lot of fear that surrounds it because we have a survival instinct, right? We try very hard not to be hurt again, right? If we've been hurt, right? And so I think Noah himself also, he says, every time we make a decision to love someone, we open ourselves to great suffering because those we most love cause us not only great joy, but also great pain. The greatest pain comes from leaving, when a child leaves home, husband, wife, partner leaves for a long period of time, when a beloved friend departs, when a country dies. The pain of leaving can tear us apart. Still, if we want to avoid the suffering of leaving, we will never experience the joy of loving. And love is stronger than fear, life stronger than death, hope stronger than despair. We have to trust that the risk of loving is always worth taking. And so I wanted you to just just watch this, right? Because often in our lives, I don't know what your experience has been in relationships, even in friendships or in ministry, but often because we've experienced a lot of hurt, we put out a lot of mask and armor within ourselves, and we do it in many different ways. All right, so I just wanted you to watch this a little bit, and then we'll come back and discuss more.
Perfectionism is one, numbing is another, you say. Example of armor.
Yes.
I go, yeah.
Like food for me. How many of you use food to numb? Okay, how many of you have ever been in like excruciating vulnerability and ended up in the pantry and you don't know how you got there?
Just standing there looking,
Yeah.
going from shelf to shelf.
Yeah.
Thinking, what has the highest carbohydrate content? That is what I want.
Yeah.
Mhm. And there are different ways to numb.
Yeah, food, drugs,
yeah.
gossip. Gossip is completely.
A lot of people are numbed out with social media now. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so bad.
Not those who are tweeting us right now, of course. But a lot of people are, that is now their numbing drug.
You know why?
Why?
Because if I get laid off at work and I post that on Facebook and I get 20 responses like, I've got your back, or I'm sorry, it feels great. But it's different than if I called you and said, hey, Oprah, it's Brene. I got laid off today. Do you have 10 minutes? Because in that real person request is a very vulnerable bid for connection. I'm asking you, can you put everything down and hold space for me for the next 15 minutes? I'm in some pain.
Yeah. Okay. And foreboding joy. Foreboding joy. Tell us what you mean by that.
Okay. How many of you, when something great is happening and you get that overwhelming feeling, start dress rehearsing tragedy? Like, what is going to come and take this away? And so you know what that is?
What is that?
That is the best barometer for measuring your capacity for vulnerability. Here's why. Joy is the most vulnerable emotion we experience. And if you cannot tolerate joy, what you do is you start dress rehearsing tragedy.
Wow.
How many of you have ever stood over your child while they're sleeping and thought, oh my God, I love you, and then pictured something horrific happening? How many of you have done that? Or woke up in the morning and thought, oh my gosh, job's going great, parents are good, this can't last. And so vulnerability, to the people I've met in this research who had the most profound capacity for joy could lean into vulnerability. But you know what's really, and you'll love this, those people that could soften into joy, when something really blissful was happening, they also got that feeling like, whoa. But instead of using it as a warning to start practicing disaster, they used it as a reminder to practice gratitude.
Ooh, that's good.
Gratitude. Joy and gratitude. And that's something we'll talk about in a while. Okay. Let me go. In Brene Brown's book, right, he said that, we talked about numbing, right? And I just want to bring this up because the thing about us, all of us numb, right? We do it in different ways. We can do it by surfing Facebook all night. We can do it by all sorts of ways, right? But the problem is that when we numb the dark, we also numb the light. We cannot selectively numb our experiences. So we can't say, I don't want the hurt, I don't want the pain, I don't want all those yucky stuff, but I want joy. I want love and acceptance and belonging and all those things. All right? Because when we numb our emotions, everything gets numb at the same time. And so, joy is one of the most tender and vulnerable things that we could ever experience. To love someone fiercely, to believe in something with your whole heart, to celebrate a fleeting moment in time, to fully engage in a life that doesn't come with any guarantees. These are all risks that involve vulnerability and often pain. And so sometimes we think about love, we think about hurt, and sometimes we get scared. But we know now that there's no other way to go about it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross actually had this very, very good quote, and she said, "People are like stained glass windows. They sparkle and shine when the sun is out, but when the darkness sets in, their true beauty is revealed only if there's a light from within. Only if there's a light from within." And so let me ask you, right, what keeps your light going from within? We talked earlier about our relationship with God, about what it means to be loved, accepted, safe, already for all time, because that's how God had decided to love us. And what would give you a light from within? Other than being loved by God, right, there's actually another thing that we need to do. And we often don't talk about this in a Christian context, in church and all that, because, Christians always talk about sacrifice. They always talk about how we have to love other people more than ourselves, above and beyond. And we think that that is the most humbling thing we could ever do. But the problem is that that's actually not what Jesus said. Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself. What does that actually really mean? And so often we talk about the concept of self-love, right? What it means to love yourself. And the first few times I actually talked about this in church with some people, right? I think a lot of them were thinking, isn't that very selfish? Self-love, right? That must be very selfish, Or isn't it very new agey, yeah? The Bible doesn't say that. No, we're supposed to love other people above ourselves, right? How come? What this self-love thing? So let me ask you, what is self-love? What is your understanding of self-love? Thoughts, ideas? Yes. Self-worth. Okay, knowing maybe. Knowing your own self-worth. Loving yourself for what you are worth. Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. Being able to forgive yourself. Yeah, absolutely, right? Especially when things go wrong, right? And we don't hold on to it, right? Being able to forgive. Yep, definitely. Yes. Accepting yourself for who you are, just because you are you. And being able to accept that fully, right? And that's something we all struggle with sometimes, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very good. Yes. Knowing your own needs. Very good. So being very intimately aware of your own needs, right? Sorry? And acting on them when necessary. Absolutely, right? So understanding your own needs and being able to act on them. Meaning being able to speak to people about them sometimes, right? When you need some of those needs met, right? Very good. Excellent. You're all very evolved, Excellent. Okay. So let me give you some questions, So some of you would wonder, what is self-love? So instead of giving a definition, so many definitions tonight, right? Let me give you a little bit. It's not a quiz, It's more for you to do a reflection when you think about self-love. And these are questions that I ask myself as well. And when we talk about self-love, we're asking you firstly, do you take responsibility for your own emotional and mental well-being? All right? So when you love someone, right, you take care of them, right? When you love yourself, you take care of yourself. And this is actually important, and it's a responsibility thing, not a selfish thing. Because often we tend to blame others when things happen, right? Sheila, she made me so angry, that's why I acted this way. Got not? Have, right? Or, Hila, he go and do this, no, that I told him he don't do, but then also, I'm very angry, right? Do we often do that? Absolutely, right? In relationships, in our community, with our friends, especially when we serve in church together. Many, yeah? Right? And we don't take responsibility for our own emotional well-being. Sometimes we do a lot of transference. Sometimes you get very stressed and angry at work. Something happened at church, you that person's fault, right? Because we actually are not taking care of us. We're not actually aware, like Yue Xuan says, right? Aware of your own needs. And we're talking about needs not just in terms of physical food needs, very important, but, and not just spiritual needs, also your own emotional needs. Where are you at this state, in terms of your state of mind, your heart? What do you need to get back into equilibrium, to regulate your own emotions? All right, so we're talking about taking responsibility for yourself, for your well-being, and not just blaming others, not just expecting your partner, for example, to know what you need. How come he never? I thought he know already. Right? People cannot read your mind, right? Yeah. So, taking responsibility for ourselves, speaking up if you have needs. 2, do you speak to yourself as respectfully and lovingly as you do to a loved one or close friend? And I ask that question, right, because a lot of us automatically have a lot of negative self-talk. And that is just across the board. Wherever culture, whatever country you come from, all of us, right, are very self-critical. Our brain, right, actually kicks into a self-critical mode. The moment you do something badly at work, you're so stupid. The moment something happens in your relationship with someone, misunderstanding, why am I such an idiot? Right? So the question is, are you aware about how you speak to yourself? And do you speak to yourself as respectfully and lovingly as you do to someone that you love, a close friend? Would you have said all those things to that person? All right. 3, do you criticize yourself more often than affirming your own actions and decisions? Okay, this goes back to the critical thing, right? And this is linked to 4. Do you back yourself up when you act on the decision, or do you keep second-guessing yourself? And a lot of us do that, right? We make a decision, and say, I think this is a good idea, I'm going to do this. Then when we actually make the decision and we actually do it, then people around, right, some people, why you do that? Actually, you could have done this. You go like, actually quite stupid. How come I decided to do that? Well, maybe I should have changed my maybe I should. Do we do that sometimes? There is a place for flexibility. There's a place for feedback. There's a place for improvement. There's a place for input from other people. But my question is, how often are you constantly second-guessing yourself for everything that you do? All right? Because if you cannot back yourself up, the way you back up a friend, your friend said, hey, I'm going to get married. Yay, okay, yay, I support you, right? I back you up, right? If you cannot back yourself up in the same way that you back up your friend, then my question would be, why? Why? Why do you not have confidence in what you believe in, what you're convicted about, in the decisions that you make? Okay. Do you know what you like or dislike? Okay. Are you aware of your needs? Are you aware of your preferences? What is important to you? Truly important to you? What are your core values in life? And do you live by them? And this is important, right? Because not only do we need to know what our core values are, what is important to us, what we want to live by, what our preferences are. The question is, are we authentic and aligned? Does what we believe to be important, is it translated in our lives? And if it's not, why not? Okay. Do you set and maintain clear boundaries for yourself and for others? And these boundaries not just in terms of physical boundaries of space, it's emotional boundaries. Do you actually allow people to encroach a little bit too much into your emotional space? When they need you or when they need your help, you're always there, but you forget about taking care of yourself. Do you set boundaries for other people? And I ask this question, right, because it's something that I have been learning. Setting boundaries is something that, has been not easy for me in my own life. And learning to people to speak up and say, no, I don't want to go to that thing. Or, no, it's important. And that goes into question 7. Are you able to say no without feeling guilty or worrying about what people think of you? All right, because you actually want to do something, all right, and you worry. And this question, right, and I ask this question to a lot of people, and sometimes people actually cannot really answer this question, right? I ask them, what nourishes your soul? And you're like, so chim. Right? But I think it's a very important question. Because I'm not just asking you about how do you take care of yourself emotionally. I'm asking you what nourishes you deep inside, your soul. It could be spiritually, all right? It could be in terms of what makes you come alive. Right? And it could be many different things for different people. For some people, it's actually just going for a run. Some people, it's for me, it's like going out cycling, being out in nature, music and different things, right? So for you, different things, right, nourish your soul. But it's important for us to know what it is and to actually do them, right? Because that's what keeps us going, keeps us sustainable. Okay, let's watch this video a little bit. It's just short, and then I'll come back again, okay?
So you say that this is probably one of your most personal books yet.
Yeah.
How is this the most personal?
Well, I see the progression of like the gifts of imperfection is be you. Daring greatly is be all in. And rising strong is fall, learn, get up, and do it again. And so it's the most personal book because as I was writing it, really the heart of this book is about these really dangerous stories we make up when we're in the midst of struggle, when we're in a fall. We are neurobiologically hardwired to make sense of that fall, to make sense of our hurt as fast as we can. And if we can come up with a story that makes sense of it, our brain chemically rewards us for that story, whether it's accurate or not. And so for me, what became very important is to write a book to help people understand when you fall, the stories you make up about your fall need to be really tested. And so as I was writing it, what I realized was that my stories of failure and heartbreak were the ones that gave me the most access to understanding what was happening behind the scenes in the story. Because we all do it. We all do it. I mean, if you and I finish this interview and we walk down the hill, and I say, thanks a lot, Oprah, I really appreciate it, and you go like this, my brain takes that as anxiety or fear, and I immediately make up a story. I knew she never liked me. That Super Soul Sunday really sucked. I didn't do the right thing. It was terrible. And then all of a sudden, I'm working off a whole narrative. How I treat you the next time I see you is off that narrative.
Wow.
And then, it just keeps going and going.
So how do we make sure that, or know that the story that we're telling ourselves is in alignment with what actually did happen? Yeah,
That's the Rising Strong process.
That's the Rising Strong process.
Right.
Yes.
So if we use that example of just you and I together. And so there's three pieces, the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. The reckoning has two seemingly easy, but pretty difficult pieces. The first thing I have to do is when you look at me like that and I feel something in response to it, I have to acknowledge, a button's been pushed. I've been hooked on something emotionally is happening here. I'm responding. And then I have to be willing to get curious about what it is. So instead of immediately going to my crazy story, I have to go to, okay, I'm emotionally hooked around something. I don't know what just happened, but I'm feeling like stressed out about it, or it hurt my feelings or something, and I need to figure out more. I mean, and
the reckoning is actually the recognition of it.
Reckoning. Something emotional has happened.
Yeah.
But the big piece of the reckoning, and this is the part that really shocked me, is I'm willing to get curious and look into it.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people are not curious about emotion because that was just drilled out of us growing up?
Yeah.
Right. So we tell ourselves stories, right? When things happen, when you're talking to a friend, the person gives an expression, immediately our mind clicks in, right? And we tell stories. And the question is, what kind of stories do we tell ourselves? Do we actually give ourselves pause before our brain starts to automatically kick in and say, I knew it lah. Gary never liked me one lah. Actually, he all pretend only, but actually, I know. Or do I, like she said, start to observe, wait, I'm starting to feel a little bit weird, right? Because he said something, but what is it I'm feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And kind of get curious about it. and explore it rather than letting it kick in automatically, because we are very good at that. Our brains are very automatic one. So, let me show you this. Connecting the dots of our lives, especially the ones we'd rather erase or skip over, the pain, the fears, the hurts, requires equal parts self-love and curiosity. Curiosity means taking a step back, observing what's going on, and getting curious about what's going on in your processes. How do all of these experiences come together to make up who I am? Right? So it's for us to reflect, to consider, to observe, to be mindful. So that is part of self-love as well, having curiosity. Brené Brown said, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Remember the quote about how our light within us, like the stained glass windows, when everything is dark around us, is the light within us that shines through, right? So, in relation to self-love, let me ask you this question about compassion. And we talked about forgiveness, right, just now, about self-love, that, self-love is about being forgiving of ourselves also. And that is related. So my question to you is, to what extent are we compassionate towards ourselves? Right, when things go wrong, when you made a mistake, when you hurt somebody, when you know that you failed, when something bad happened because of you, to what extent are you compassionate towards yourself? And I ask you this question, right? Because when we talk about compassion, it's same as love, about loving others, right? Same as practicing compassion on others. How hard we are on ourselves will determine how hard we are on others. And I know some of you may not agree, because on the surface, most of us are actually harder on ourselves than on others. Agree? How many of you are harder on yourselves than you are on others? Yes, right? Gary definitely, very hard on himself. And it's true, right? It's true that we can be very, very hard on ourselves, especially those of us who are perfectionists. We can be extremely hard on ourselves, and we're actually much more gracious toward other people, and that is true. But why I say this, right, is because although on the surface it seems very true that we are harder on ourselves than on others, the thing is that the things that are not obvious, it comes through. The way our eyes, things that goes through our eyes, it's not words, it's not obvious words. We will never be ungracious to somebody, but the way that our expectations come across, even though we try to couch it in the best way possible, the energy that people feel from us, it is, unfortunately, is just what it is. Okay? I'm not saying that, that is your fault. Don't be hard on yourself. I'm not saying that that's your fault, okay? I know that it's very hard for you, especially when you're hard on yourself. But the thing is that what happens within us, right, it naturally flows out as an energy to other people. And I found that to be true of myself. The more I've actually learned to love myself and to be compassionate to myself, the more I find that I can be more authentically compassionate to other people. On the surface, I'm quite compassionate one. True? Quite lah, a bit approachable, a bit people okay lah, all right. Quite got empathy, whatever lah. It's not that it's all fake, promise, not fake, It's all real. It's from my heart completely, as far as I can give. But to the extent that I can be compassionate on myself, right, is the extent and depth that I can offer somebody else. And that's just what it is. All right? And so when we talk about wanting to be compassionate about other people, it cannot be divorced from our own practice of compassion and forgiveness on ourselves, kindness to ourselves, because it's a natural flow, it's a natural outflow from our lives. It's not something we will. I'm going to be compassionate on this person. All right? Yes, it's something we practice, but it actually starts from deep within us. And that's when it's most genuine, most authentic, most loving. All right? And we see this in even the Bible, right? In Colossians 3:12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. You know, for the longest time, I'll read this verse and go like, oh yeah, clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, so we can show it to other people, right? It's clothe ourselves with compassion. It's compassion for other people, kindness for other people, humility towards other people, gentleness and patience towards other people, right? That would have been my mindset for a long time. But then when I read this again, I realize that clothing ourselves with compassion, kindness, it starts from a settledness from ourselves. That if we do not experience and understand and practice this kindness, this humility, this compassion on ourselves, it is only going to be it's going to be a very good effort externally, but it will not always flow out in the most genuine and authentic way, right, that people will feel. And the funny thing about human beings, right, is that we are very clever. You know, there are a lot of things, right, that we actually sense without logically or rationally talking about it. It's just a feeling, right? And so that's where it goes. So even in wholeheartedness, right, we talked about this earlier, right? There is exercising courage, compassion, connection every day. And when we're talking about compassion, we're talking about it's a practice. It's not just practicing on other people, it's practicing on yourself. See, compassion is not a virtue. Often in a lot of religions, we talk about compassion as if it's a virtue, right? Meaning somebody has compassion or don't have compassion, right? But compassion is actually a commitment. It's not something we have or don't have. It's something we choose to practice every day. And if you actually, have read some of the things from mindfulness and some of what the Buddhists have done in meditation and mindfulness, right? And they actually studied the brains. Compassion is actually a muscle in your brain. The more you practice compassion, both on yourself and on others, the more the brain muscle actually strengthens. It actually becomes bigger. So just like you build up your muscles, right, your biceps, your triceps, right, in a gym, the compassion muscle is the same thing. It's something that builds up as you practice it day by day. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Not from someone better and someone lesser. It's a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. Okay? So it's understand our own darkness, being able to sit with others in their darkness. The thing about self-love, right, we talk about self-love, compassion, practicing compassion about yourself, right, is that we often talk about this whole, self-love, self-help thing. But one of the most important things we need to realize also, right, is that other than the practice, of course, we try our best to learn about our self-worth, what it means that we belong to God, that God accepts us and loves us. But often, right, we need to be taught to love aspects of ourselves again and again by the people around us. And that's where we all come into play, right? This is not just a singular personal exercise. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to be compassionate to myself. It's not just that, because sometimes it's very hard, right? Like what this says, right? This psychologist Ken Page, it says, as much as we want to control our own destiny, the humbling truth is that sometimes the only way to learn self-love is being loved. Have any of you actually experienced that? That sometimes you struggle, to love yourself. And along the way, somebody came along, a good friend, a mentor, someone in church, or someone in your life, family, friend, loved you, accepted you. And that was the moment you started to realize things about yourself. You started to learn to love yourself. All right? Especially precisely in the places where we feel most unsure and most tender. The places that we're most vulnerable. When that happens, we feel freedom, relief, permission to love in a deeper way. And no amount of positive self-talk can replicate that experience. It's a gift of intimacy, not of willpower. And so we're putting together a whole concept of intimacy and love with this whole concept of compassion and exercising and practicing it. It's not what we only practice for ourselves, it's also what we offer as a gift to one another. Right? Because it's going to be a journey that we learn and grow together. And it's not easy. Our brains are quite a machine. They actually have developed quite well over the years on its own. With its automatic thoughts, and when it's hard on ourselves, it's very hard. It's hard to change some of these habitual thoughts and some of these criticisms. So it takes time, all right? And we help one another in the process. I really like this quote. This is actually from Noah. He says, there's a twilight zone in our hearts that we ourselves cannot see. Even when we know quite a lot about ourselves, our gifts, our weaknesses, our ambitions, aspirations, our motives, and our drives, large parts of ourselves remain in the shadow of consciousness. And this is a very good thing. We will always remain partially hidden to ourselves. Other people, especially those who love us, can often see our twilight zones better than we ourselves can. What some of us call blind spots, right? Sometimes the people we love see them much more obviously than us, right? Much more clearly than us. The way we are seen and understood by others is different from the way we see and understand ourselves. We will never fully know the significance of our presence in the lives of our friends. And that's a grace. That's a gift. A grace that calls us not only to humility, but to a deep trust in those who love us. It is the twilight zones of our hearts where true friendships are born. And that is my hope and prayer for all of us, that in our community, that we will find that meeting place, those twilight zones, right, where we help one another fulfill our potentials and help one another to understand what it means to be loved and accepted. Now, when you talk about practicing compassion, right, what it means really is entering into someone's pain, fear, suffering, brokenness, shame, confusion, and holding space for them, right? In the video just now, Brene Brown mentioned something about holding space, right? And I just wanted to share this with you. What does actually holding space actually mean? When you think about holding space for somebody, what comes to your mind? I don't have to read out from there. You can come up with your own things. When you think about wanting someone to hold space for you, what are you looking for? I think holding space, right, starts from us firstly having space in our hearts and our minds. Because until we have heart with a space within our hearts and minds, where we're not all cluttered with the stresses at our work, and the different concerns and worries that we have, it's very hard for us to hold space or offer space to other people. You know, the Japanese have a word, right? They call yoyu. Yoyu actually means space. It means the abundance of, the excess of space to be able to do something or be something. So space actually has that concept, right? Whether you actually have that space for someone else. So when you say holding space for someone, we're talking about being fully present, right? So like when you're talking to someone, you're being fully present. It means listening and attending to that person with our whole being. Have you ever actually just listened to someone, right, as they share, and actually hold their gaze, hold their attention in their space, right, just with your eyes? Anyone? Yes, Sean, Gary, fantastic. Darren, right? I'm sure all of you have had experiences like that, right? Where you're not rushing to say something, where you're not just trying to give a solution or to fix it, but you're actually just holding that space for them, right? And so when we talk about holding that space, right, we're talking about attending them 100%, being there, but it's also about creating a non-judgmental and safe space. And those of you who have been trained as counselors or coaches, or you've done a little bit of that, we often talk about non-judgmental space, right? Why non-judgmental? Are we all very judgy people? No? Yes? not to be hard on us, Yeah, we're not. When we say non-judgmental, right? What we're saying is, right, our brains are very quick to think about all sorts of things. It switches. It's automatic. When somebody is telling us something, when something is happening, when we're observing one thing, our brains are making judgments. Not judgment as in being judgmental, but we're constantly discerning and making judgments about stuff. Right? That's how our brain works. It's very normal. It's very common. It's being human. Okay? That's why it actually takes extra effort to hold a non-judgmental space. Meaning that the moment you open that space to listen, right, your brain, you're actually trying to stop your brain from clicking into all sorts of thoughts, or different types of solutions you could offer. The moment the person stops talking, I tell you, actually, option 1, then option 2, then option 3. That's what our brains are doing constantly, right? The question is, can we actually kind of hold that space, hold the movement of thought, and actually just listen? Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about all this listening thing and, holding space a little bit more in our third session, because we're going to do that about, feedback and that kind of stuff. But I just want to leave these thoughts with you, right, for the concept of practicing compassion at least. Okay. Okay. So something that you can discuss. What is one thing I would like to do to practice compassion on myself? Right? It could be something very simple. It doesn't have to be very big or deep. Just one thing. And what's one thing I'd like to do to practice compassion on others better? So if you could just discuss in your groups, I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that, okay? How's your conversations going along? I'm so glad some of you are still talking very good. I know some of you find the questions a little bit hard for a tiring Friday evening for your poor brains. So some of them ask me, got multiple choice or not? I said, yeah, I should have come out with multiple choice. Like, A, I will forgive myself more readily or something like that. But any ideas like from some of you who have been discussing? I mean, what's one thing that you do to kind of practice compassion in yourself better or compassion on others better? So you can help the rest also, especially those who are very brain dead. Yes? No? Sorry? The question is, any ideas? Like what's one thing that you would do to practice compassion on yourself or on others better?
Yes, to put it, the story, I guess picking up on the story there is just to, we all try and do things with a good heart and good intention, and sometimes if we didn't hear back, we would just keep doing the same thing and not getting the perhaps more effective impact or outcome for someone, benefit.
So being able to use the feedback as a way to kind of improve or to moving forward, right? So being able to understand our stories, right? The stories that we tell ourselves, right? How we make sense of things. When things go wrong, when we make mistakes, how we actually reframe those stories, right? How we tell ourselves those stories. Anyone else? No? Okay. I'm going to leave these questions to you. We're going to move on to just the last portion. Okay, go back. And this is on joy and gratitude. And just show you this video, and then we'll finish up with this part.
I think the relationship between joy and gratitude was one of the most important things I found in the research. I wasn't expecting it, but what I found, 12 years of research, 11,000 pieces of data, I did not interview in all that time a person who would describe themselves as joyful or describe their lives as joyous who did not actively practice gratitude. And for me, it was very counterintuitive because I kind of went into the research thinking that the relationship between joy and gratitude was, if you're joyful, then you should be grateful. But it wasn't that way at all. It was really that practicing gratitude invites joy into our lives. And when I say practice, I think this is the part that really changed my life. It changed my family and the way we live every day. When I say practice gratitude, I don't mean kind of like the attitude of gratitude or feeling grateful. I mean practicing gratitude. These folks shared in common a tangible gratitude practice. They either kept gratitude journals. Some of them did interesting things like at 1, 2, 3, 4, like at 12:34 every day, they said something out loud that they were grateful for. They, one of the things that we do, like we say grace at dinner. And so now after grace, we go around and everyone in my family says something they're grateful for. I mean, and what's interesting is when we first started, I have a first grade son, Charlie, and 8th grade daughter, Ellen. And at first I thought, and we've been doing it for a couple of years now, like they're going to like, oh God, Mom. And there was a little like, this is, are you experimenting on us? There was a little bit of that. But now what's interesting, even after we did it for like a couple of weeks, that on those crazy busy nights where we're trying to like get to soccer and piano and homework, and Steve and I are just like, we say a quick prayer and we start eating, and my kids are like, whoa, what are you grateful for? And it's been extraordinary because not only absolutely does it invite more joy into our house, it also is such a soulful window into what's going on in my kids' lives. So there are some days where my 8th grader will be like, I'm joyful that there's a huge, thick wall between my room and my brother's room. Something just very, honest. But there are other days she'll say, she had a friend whose mother recently died. And she said, for a month she would say, I'm just so grateful that y'all are healthy right now. And so not only did it make us all more aware of what we had, and more willing to slow down and really be thankful for the joyful moments we had. But it let me know where she was emotionally in her life. And my son is always, I'm grateful for bugs, I'm grateful for frogs, but sometimes he'll say, I'm grateful that you picked me up early, or, I'm grateful that I finally understand adjectives, So there's a great quote that says, it's not joy that makes us grateful, it's gratitude that makes us joyful. And it's by a Jesuit priest. And I guess I was just amazed to find that bubble up so strongly in the research. It's life-changing.
So, joy and gratitude. This is a quote that she was talking about. It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful. And this is actually written in a book by a Benedictine monk. And it's a very interesting book. But it's interesting, right, that in the research, this is also what it shows, right? That is not because we are so joyful and, everything's going great, right? And then we are grateful. It's actually the practice of gratitude, the practice of noticing what's going on in your life, noticing what you're experiencing, the great things you're experiencing, even the small things you're experiencing, and being grateful for those things in a very practical way that actually makes us joyful. It actually brings joy. And this brings us back to the passages that we're very familiar with, right? Always be joyful. You see, Paul already had that concept way before, right? All this research came into play, right? Always be joyful, never stop praying, be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. And above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. And let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. For as members of one body, we are called to live in peace. And always, always, always be thankful. All right? And so that's something that we can think about as you think, what is one thing I can do to cultivate gratitude daily or maybe regularly? Okay, what's one thing that I can practically do to cultivate gratitude daily? All right? Just want you to think about that. All right? Any ideas from the floor? Anything that comes to your mind? For Brene Brown, they do it as a family, right? They say grace and then they ask, okay, what are you grateful for today? Okay. Maybe that's something we can do. In our cell groups, often we ask for Thanksgiving, right? Do you all usually do that? Like we ask for prayer requests. So we ask people, any Thanksgiving? Anything that you want to give God thanks for, right? That is happening to your life. But usually, people wait until it's very big, right? It's a very big thing, then we talk about it, right? We won't say, I thank God for the blue skies today, that kind of thing. And that's what a daily gratitude thing does, right? It makes us notice even the small things and to take joy in every little moment that's special, even though they seem small, right? Any other ideas out there? Yes, Aaron.
Now, I've been keeping a check of my pulse all week, and so because it's been a bit. So one of the things I realized, maybe there's a direct link between gratitude and keeping calm, and but no, I walk over this little bridge from my home to the shopping center where I live, and it's like a canal. And I notice we all rush from between one traffic light and the next to get across and make it before the little man turns red. And I must say, the last week every day I've been just wandering across because I know I'm not going to make the traffic light. And I stop and I have a look, and every single day there's always something different to see what's happening down in that canal. It's just incredible. Little birds, things floating down, but anyway, it was just, it's fish. It's just something changes in it every day, and I just think, wow, I don't know, it just takes the focus off.
No, absolutely, and it's actually about noticing, right? Observing, and that goes back to right in the beginning when we were talking about developing our relationship with God, right? Intimacy with God. It's actually about being aware, being present, right, of each and every moment. Any other thoughts? Any other canals, longkaos? No? I'll leave this question with you for you to think about. I wanted to do a pledge, right? And I think, it's a bit cheesy to do pledge, right? But never mind I will leave it, of course, always by invitation. No, not coercion. So you don't need to coerce you to pledge, okay? But I was actually thinking it's actually important for us, right? Because we talk a lot about a lot of big concepts over the last 2 sessions. And I thank you for sitting with me and going through these concepts. I know they are quite big, and a lot of it is not always tangible, but they're all very important. And it can be very taxing on the brain, right? We're asking a lot of these big questions about life, right? Because they are important, but they're also very difficult to kind of sometimes wrap our minds around. And so I thought, we can do this pledge together if and when you want. I'll just let you read it, but I'll read it out to you as we go along, then you can think about it. It says, "Today, I choose authenticity and wholehearted living, even when it's hard, even when I'm wrestling with the shame and the fear of not being enough, and especially when the joy is so intense that I'm afraid to let myself feel it. I will practice courage by being emotionally honest, setting boundaries, and embracing my vulnerability. I will exercise compassion by remembering that we are all made of strength and struggle and connected to each other through a loving and compassionate God and a resilient human spirit. I will nurture connection and belonging by letting go of what I think I'm supposed to be and embracing who I am, God's beloved. Today, I invite gratitude, grace, and joy into my life. Today, I will live and love with my whole heart." Is that something that perhaps resonates with you? And if it does, perhaps you can say this pledge together with me. For some of you, you might want to say it out loud, and I invite you to do that with me. For some of you, you may not want to say it out loud because you're a bit shy, taking pledges, but you want to say it in your heart. For some of you, you're not ready. And you're going to, not really, I'm not so convinced yet. And that's fine too. Okay? But I'm just going to give us a minute just so that we can say this together and not just to say it verbally, but I want you to think about it from your heart if this is something that you want to work on in your life. Okay? As we come together in the community, is this something that you want to be able to do together? All right? You ready? Today, I choose authenticity and wholehearted living. Even when it's hard, even when I'm wrestling with the shame and fear of not being enough, and especially when the joy is so intense that I'm afraid to let myself feel it. I will practice courage by being emotionally honest, setting boundaries, and embracing my vulnerability. I will exercise compassion by remembering that we are all made of strength and struggle and connected to each other through a loving and compassionate God and resilient human spirit. I will nurture connection and belonging by letting go of what I think I'm supposed to be and embracing who I am, God's beloved. Today, I invite gratitude, grace, and joy into my life. Today, I will live and love with my whole heart. Thank you. I'm going to leave some homework with you as we end for this evening. But before we go into homework, do you have any questions from this evening, from tonight? Yes. Yes, you'll be able to access all this information online. What I'm going to do is that, as I did for the first session, I will PDF all these slides, and then it will be uploaded together, the video, so you can actually download the slides for yourself. Okay? Any other questions? No? It's okay. Whenever questions pop up, when there are thoughts and suggestions and dialogue that you want to have, please let me know, okay? Okay, some homework. The last time I gave you homework was very easy, I gave you video homework, right? Go watch video, right? Today, right, the homework I'm going to give you, right, is difficult. It's actually, right, the questions that we talked about earlier. We talked about a lot of different questions earlier, and some of it is a bit difficult. Some of it takes a little bit of time for you to think about, for you to pray about, for you to actually commit to by yourself. Because you see, all these things are great information, right, to have. But until it sinks down in our hearts, until we start to practice one or two, I'm not asking you to do everything, until we start to practice or change one or two things, nothing's going to change in our lives. We can know all this and store it in our brains, but nothing is actually going to change. So I want to challenge us, okay, to go through reflection questions again, commit to new intentions and practices with God. It can be one small thing, it can be two, you decide together with God. You go think and reflect. Okay, two, practice what you commit yourself to, even if it's just one thing. Okay, so you commit to that thing, you decide, and then you practice. Three, if possible, I encourage you to find an accountability buddy. Okay, so it can be someone from here, someone who's going through the program as well. Okay, and you tell them, you know what, and ask them, have you decided what you're going to do, or, what have you committed to doing? What's that one thing or two things that you're going to do? And then you keep each other accountable. How are you going with that? Do you need any help or support? How can I encourage you in the process? Okay? Because I think sometimes that's the best way, right? Because this is a very tangible way for us to help each other in the process. Okay? And I know that you'll be wondering, what all the reflection questions are. Can you put it all together in one slide? I didn't put all in one slide because all cannot fit in. But I put into 3 slides. I don't know why all become 1. Because originally I got number 1, My math's not so bad. Okay, but basically the questions are all there. It will be in the PDF. Right? I'll give it to all of you. But if you want to take snapshots, you can. But these are some of the questions that we talked about throughout this evening. All right, I know that we don't have enough time to really run through. Please go ahead and talk with your CGs, your friends, your accountability buddies about some of these questions, especially those that kind of resonated with you and things that you actually wanted to work on. All right, is that okay? Okay. And this, okay? Ken? All right. Okay, so if no questions, any additional comments? Any big disputes or disagreements? Ken also. If not, thank you so much for spending this evening with me. Thank you so much for bringing yourselves, your presence, your minds, your hearts here. I hope it has been helpful in some way for you. And please have a good journey home and have a great weekend, okay? Yeah, good night.